Alrighty. Time for a stream. Oh, and an echo. There we go. So how are you doing, Mr. Adam?
Doing A-okay. I'm waiting for your audio to come through to see if you sound like crap.
Well, yeah, probably. And it wouldn't even be the microphone's fault, you know.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. Well, I should have more than enough bandwidth to handle it now. That's for sure.
That you should.
Oh yeah.
That's good news, man.
Yeah, it's it's pretty amazing. 10 times faster. Sure, why not?
Same price.
What a deal. Hey, Alan, good to see you. And Vince made it as well. Hey, Vince, how are you? All right.
Silence those loud dings. Silence my phone.
Oh, yes.
Pretty loud.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because Apple insists on having the most shrill sound for your messages.
That notification is the most important thing happening in your life right now. All right.
And it definitely has the urgency.
It does. It does. Oh my. Well, yeah, so a couple, I guess, current event things. I've had the same internet connection for probably going on 10 years now, close to it. Used to be Verizon Fios in Florida, and then they sold off all of their, I guess, Fios business to Frontier. And Frontier is sort of how should I put this? Let's see if I get kicked off after I criticize my ISP. They're sort of a second tier. I mean, they have a huge holding. I mean, they're a large ISP, but most of their growth has been through acquisition. And they aren't the best at managing it necessarily. I mean, so I have to say that it's been very solid, and I don't get any outages. I mean, almost never. And the speeds hold pretty true. But in terms of like their website and their customer service, I figured out at one point earlier this year that I was paying 3 times as much as a new customer would for service that was 3 times faster than I was getting. And so I finally called a couple of days ago on Monday and just said, look, what can I do here? You know, I'm paying somewhere around like $80 a month just for internet, which, truth be told, I mean, I use it continuously. We use it for everything. We don't have cable. We use it for all of our media, everything we do. So I'm not claiming that that's like an unreasonable amount, but it's just a little unfair considering new customers were getting such a good deal. So I was able to get for the same price, instead of 50 up, 50 down, 500 up, 500 down. So a little bit of a difference there. So I've been having fun for the last few days. Like go to a distro website and say, download that. And it takes like 30 seconds to download a 2 or 3 gig file. And it's, so yeah, it's nice to be in the modern era. So yeah, no data caps, half a gig up and down. That makes me happy.
Hell yeah.
So the reason for this stream tonight was I've been putting out just little quick kind of tip videos. I figure there's enough 20, 30, 40-minute videos out there. I'm just trying to focus on, here's the thing I did, and I'm just going to make a little quick video on it, and then everybody can just watch it in 5 or 10 minutes and get on with their lives. And so, I mean, I myself find there's a lot of videos with good content, but it's just hard to sit through. I don't it sounds silly, but I don't have 30 minutes to sit and watch a video about something, right? So I'll speed it up a lot of times and do those types of things, but I feel like I'm going to miss content. So for me, at least, I feel like if I have an idea, I want to put a video out there. I'm just going to make it as short as possible and just be ruthless with the editing and just like bare minimum. And so anyway, I was doing that earlier about a fix for the Ubuntu dock, not a fix, but just being able to change the Ubuntu dock's behavior. And I got it recorded and all put together. I edited it all together. And I guess I just wasn't listening properly because at the very end I had it all laid out and it spent probably a good hour, putting it together. And then my audio was just, it was weird. It was some kind of buzz or like a weird, it just sounded really bad. And so I went back and I looked, what was it because I'll do things like I strip out the audio into a WAV file and then use that for editing. And was it that process? No, that was fine. Or no, it was there as well. And then went all the way back to the source recording and it was garbage too. So 2 hours of my day just down the tubes. And I thought, you know what, instead of making another try of that same video, there was other stuff I wanted to show on Ubuntu as well. How about I just do a stream and I'll just cover all of it. And then that way it's out there. I get the thing out there I want. Plus I get to talk with folks and stuff like that. So anyway, that's why I'm here tonight. Hey, Steve, good to see you. Mitchell. So yeah, I'm just going to run through from a fresh install of Ubuntu 19.10, the tweaks I go through and just the things I change to more or less make it my own. So you hop over there now. And some of this is just going to be, I mean, maybe just kind of silly, but I'm literally just starting from a fresh install here. I ran the updates and that's about all I've done. And so just kind of running from top to bottom. I really don't need LibreOffice there. I don't need the Software Center. I don't need help. So I just kind of get rid of all of this. I don't use Thunderbird. Yeah, I'll leave Rhythmbox. Why not? So clean up my favorites. The other thing is I don't use desktop extensions. Or I'm sorry, desktop files. Like I'd rather just have a clean desktop. I know lots of people use that. But for me, I don't really like it. And this is only sort of a half measure anyway, because the interactivity between GNOME files, Nautilus and this extension isn't complete. So it's a little wonky anyway, but I will go ahead and remove that extension because it's actually installed by default. And actually, before I do that, I'll show in the terminal or in tweaks, because that's the next thing that I do. So what I wanted to show is just in tweaks, there is the extensions listed, but it's not even turned on because when you install an extension from a repository, it puts the files in place and it doesn't care whether or not this is actually enabled. So you see here, we've got desktop icons, app indicators, which are, if you have, it's essentially the tray apps up here, and then the dock itself. So the way to get rid of any of these, if you don't want them, is to actually uninstall the package itself. So I want to remove GNOME shell extension desktop icons. And it's not going to remove them right away. I actually have to restart the shell. So Alt F2, R, and then when it restarts, it's gone. So that's how you get rid of a pre-installed or an extension that's installed in the repository itself. All right, so I got tweaks in there. The other thing I want to do, that's where I was going. I forgot what I was doing. Just add this to favorites and get it over with. Is I'm one of the weirdos that loves light themes. And I know you're all going to cringe, and I'm sorry if I blow out your eyeballs, but we're going Yara light. because the contrast for me between those toolbars is much easier to see than even just regular Yarrow. You start stacking these on top of each other, and all of a sudden to me, I have a really hard time seeing the contrast between those. So I love that there's a light theme option here for me, because I can very easily differentiate that rather than the dark itself. So that's why I do that. Let's see. I think I'm done in here for now. Yeah, and I actually need to close this. All right, the next thing I do is the online GNOME extensions. So from the website itself. And there's a couple things you have to install. So the browser extension, and then we refresh, and that's going to tell me I need the native host connector as well. So for Ubuntu, we want to Chrome GNOME shell. All right, now if I go back and refresh, I can install extensions from here and also manage the extensions that are already installed. And I've been pretty judicious with installing extensions. So just a quick bit of history on this from the last month or so. I installed Ubuntu 19.04 and was playing around with it. Had some, I mean, it was okay. I didn't have major issues with it. I was really looking forward to 3.3.4, GNOME 3.3.4. And so what I wanted to do was upgrade when that came out. But I've had issues in the past with doing a fresh install of Ubuntu when it first comes out. You know, there's that sort of once it's released, and then there's that first wave of fixes that come out. I've done better when I wait for that first wave. So I waited 2 weeks to upgrade, and I upgraded 19.04 to 19.10. And I had some pretty serious problems with performance, freezing. The shell would crash on me, apps would crash on me, and it just, anytime there was any like disk IO, it was really chugging and sluggish, not very fun. And it sort of ruined it for me. And I was ready to walk away from it. And then I thought, you know, maybe the upgrade is what caused some of this weirdness. So let me just go ahead and wipe it out, and I'll do a fresh install of 19.10 and see how that goes. And that was, I want to say 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now. And it's been absolutely perfect since then. So there was definitely something there, and I didn't do enough sort of research and digging around to figure out exactly what was causing that. But the end result was that a clean install of 19.10 worked perfectly fine. It has continued to work perfectly fine. And that's on my laptop as well as the desktop I'm using right now. So, you know, I don't know what's caused it, but that fixed it. And just like with anything with computers, sometimes a reboot will fix that problem you can't figure out, or a fresh install can work wonders. So I'll take it. So, all right, back to here. So, I'm sorry. So part of that, the thought process I was working through there was that part of that, I wasn't sure if it was extensions that maybe caused the problem, because, you know, GNOME isn't, you know, extensions are considered add-on, you know, obviously by their name, but they aren't formally supported. So, you know, it's a common thing that when a new version of GNOME comes out, that the extensions that had been working may not work now. You know, they change things in the underlying shell that these extensions hook into, that, you know, either those things change or something happens where they just don't work the way they should. And even at the best of times, some of these can cause some problems in terms of, you know, just what they're doing in the shell itself. So some of these are pretty innocuous. They're very small little pieces of functionality. Some of them are much more extensive. And so, for example, we're going to look at dash to dock, which the Ubuntu dock is based on dash to dock. So, and that's a pretty substantial extension that's changing a lot of functionality. But a lot of some of these, here's dash to dock here. So some of these really aren't as sort of invasive, or I guess they don't change enough things to maybe be a conflict. The other thing that occurs to me is not the developers of these, I think, do a very good job individually. So each extension on its own, for the most part, especially the popular ones, are pretty well built and tested and used by a lot of people. So there's a lot of feedback. But the thing that isn't really tested, and one of the more difficult things to test for, is using a lot of extensions in combination and the potential for conflicts between functionality of those extensions if they're touching sort of the same things. There's a potential there for a conflict. And as far as I'm aware, nobody's testing the same exact set that I was using. So there's a possibility that maybe those extensions that I was using in combination were the problem as well. So I'm trying to be very judicious about the extensions I do install. But there are a couple that I really need. Clipboard indicator. So I really like having a clipboard extension, clipboard add-on. And this one's pretty fantastic. You know, it just hooks right into the shell, gives you a very nice clipboard. The reason for this is I'm doing a lot of like web building, things like that, where I'm copying code from one place to another, copying URLs, copying just lots of pieces of text that I then need to get back to. And if I didn't have a clipboard manager to be able to get back and flip between those things, my workflow would be, it would be really annoying to have to go back to the source application, get that. This just sort of centralizes that whole process. So yeah, this is a great extension. I really like it. I use it all the time. And it just, as soon as you copy something, it just ends up in there. And then, I think you guys know what a clipboard manager is, but if you don't, and then when I want to get back to it, I just copy that or click that, and then that becomes what's in the clipboard, and I can paste it. So can't live without that one. This is another one I install, no annoyance. So if you've used GNOME Shell or GNOME Desktop, you know that sometimes you'll launch an application, and then up here, it'll pop out a notification that says your application's ready instead of just showing it to you, and loading it, which is just kind of silly. Now they supposedly have some good design reasons for that. So if you're in the middle of doing something and a application launches, they don't want it to sort of take focus. And I guess it's to take the annoying part of having an application open unexpectedly away from it, except that it then creates its own annoyance. So this extension is called No Annoyance, which I think is kind of funny. But what it does is it just eliminates that your Windows ready notification and just puts it right into focus. And so very simple, but fixes a goofy little problem. And there are a ton of other extensions in here that are great. But again, I think if you get too many going, it gets to be a little busy. This sound input and output device chooser is really nice. So the default GNOME sound indicator just sort of gives you, if you have a microphone, it'll give your desktop audio and your microphone, but that's basically it. And then if you want to change that, you have to come into here and then change them in the sound settings here. And so what that does is just gives you a nice little drop down right here where you could just drop this down. And essentially it's a condensed version of this, more or less. So I usually will add that. This is a virtual machine. There's no point in doing it here. So, okay. So those are the extensions that I would normally always add. Tweaking the Ubuntu dock. So this is what I was making the video about earlier. And actually, before I jump in that, I'll come and check the chat. Say hi to folks. Hey, Farron. Good to see you. How are you? I am in, if anyone wants to do voice chat, if you're interested, I'm on the Biddle Discourse server under the streaming section towards the bottom, live right now. So if you'd like to come in and say hi, please do. Be nice to hear from you. All right. So yeah, the video I was making, if you don't know, so the Ubuntu dock itself is the dash to dock extension just repackaged for Ubuntu. And they do give you a couple of the controls that are in Dash to Dock. So if you go to Dash to Dock, if you've ever used this, the full one, and he only has a piece of the screenshot, piece of the UI here, the settings UI, it has an extensive list of configuration options that you can go, you can change the size of the icons, the backgrounds, the indicators, on and on and on. It's very exhaustive. And so you can customize it quite a bit, and it's pretty fantastic. So Ubuntu Dock is based on that, but they only really provide a few different controls for it. So if you come to settings and look at Dock, you can auto hide it, you can change the icon size, or you can change the position. So those are the three things that they've exposed here. Hopefully in the future, they'll put a few more things in here. I'm not sure how difficult that is to do, but I don't think it's particularly challenging. But so what I've been doing, since it is based on Dash to Dock, all of the settings are there. You just can't see them. So what I've been doing is installing dconf editor. No. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, because I got to put apt in there. There we go. Okay. And so if you don't know, dconf editor is a GTK configuration editor. And it's going to let you see all of the different configuration options underneath of underneath the GNOME shell, all of the desktop settings. So where does that go? Probably went right by it. There it is. Okay. So you come in here, and just like this may be familiar to some folks, the registry editor in Windows. It's sort of the same thing. It's like, here be dragons. If you break something, it's your fault. But the location of that particular setting is under org GNOME shell extensions dash to dock. Now, all of a sudden, so we saw in settings, right? They had three different options here. Well, in here are all of the settings that you would get under the normal Dash to Dock admin UI, albeit in a much less user-friendly way. But this is where you can actually come and change all of those different options. All right. So one of the things that I really am used to with the dock is the idea of being able to click on the icon in the dock and have it minimize. And Ubuntu does not have that set by default. And by rights, to be fair, neither does Dash to Dock as a default. But I prefer that this click action, instead of focus or previews, I want to set this to, so turn off default value and set this to minimize. Click apply. Now, when I click on a window, it'll either minimize or open back up. And that's the behavior I expect out of a dock. So it focuses it first, then it minimizes it, then it brings it back. So there you go. Now, the other thing I like to change in here, and this is a tiny one, is the indicator. What is that called? I don't remember what it's called. You could search, and if I was smart, I would just search, but
this is some next level detail, man.
Hey man, this is what you expect when you come here for the real deal, right?
That's
well,
true.
That's the thing though. So what I had been doing before this was I would uninstall the Ubuntu dock and then install dash to dock. But really, there's no reason because the Ubuntu one's technically the one that's supported. And so anyway, so another thing that I do is I tend to stack a lot of icons over here, and it will shrink to accommodate them, or it will actually allow you to scroll through them. But I don't need to see mounts. And so this is devices and volumes that would be mounted. If you have, mounted shares and stuff, they start to pile up down here. And I never remember to use that icon. I always just use the file manager. So I just turn off show mounts. And then the last thing I'm going to show in here is that indicators. And I know it's here somewhere. I think it's called like application indicators. I spotted it every time earlier today, and it's up. There it is. Oh. There it is. Dots. Okay, running indicator style. Thank you. Okay, so that is the little dot that's next to here, and I know this is so like tiny and silly, but I like the dashes. So now you see that they're dashes instead of dots, and if you have two, then you have two dashes. Isn't that fun? Yeah. Yeah, this is what I do with my time, folks. In case you're wondering. Yeah, so those are the simple basic things that I changed that I need to have act, it just has to be this way, or it bugs me. So the last thing I do is change the color scheme in the terminal, and I just made a video about this the other day, but the default terminal built-in color schemes, like, okay, so you've got the Ubuntu purple, never enough purple. So Tango Dark, it's not terrible, but what I like is so if you use a code editor like VS Code or something like that, usually they'll have a lot of different choices, and I've gotten used to that. So it's always kind of silly to me that I've got, they're all the same choice, just two of the same basically. One's a light and one's a dark. And then if you were to do custom, there's a couple built-in schemes, but again, almost nothing. And so you could create a custom one here, and I've done it, but it's a lot of work to come in and change every single color, and you're never sure like which color affects what thing. So I found a tool called Go, as in Vincent Van Gogh, and I know it's pronounced like Gah or something like that in the native language. I'm not going to do it justice, so why say it? All right. So this little command, a single command, you run that in your terminal, and it's going to give you a choice of 185 different color schemes, and you can see all of those themes on their website. And if you can't find one you like in here, there may be no hope for you. You may want to switch around and play around, but so recently it wins the title of dumbest name, but Programmer. The contrast and the colors are very, very clean, and I really enjoy the way that looks. I've installed it enough times to know that it's 19 by now, but if you don't know, basically you just scroll back up and find the one you're looking for, put in the number. It will create a profile for you with that theme now. And so if I close my terminal, and of course, why would you ever want the terminal in the sidebar? There you go. So you've got your custom theme, and you could do that for one or more. There is an all option. I'm going to try it just to see, but essentially that means that it's going to create 185 profiles here, which I don't really know what that'll do. I mean, at best, it's going to be ridiculous and busy, and at worst, it's going to do something terrible to the system. So, but there you go. So, those are the basics of the things I do. Oh, well, obviously, I changed the clock because, I use 12-hour. I set some custom keyboard shortcuts. I do use a different screenshot. I mean, all the different like applications and stuff. I'm not going to go through all of that, but and as far as GNOME Shell is concerned, those are the changes that I make out of the gate. And from there, I've been, I can't even explain why, but for the last month and a half, I've been really happy with using GNOME after not enjoying it in the slightest before that. And that's trying it with Zorin, Zorin completely changing the layout and look and feel. And that's using it on all the different distributions just to see if it was any different. But ultimately going back to Plasma and that being where I wanted to stay and be all the time. And now when I go back to Plasma, which I still do every couple of days, I'll boot back in. It is, it's still the tool that gets the job done. So trust me, if like something blew up in my Ubuntu installation, I know without a shadow of a doubt, if I go into Kubuntu, I'm going to be able to just get things done because it's going to work. Nothing's going to break on me. But there's just something about the way that GNOME handles fonts, the animations, it's so keyboard driven with the desktops, the way it generates new and additional desktops as you need them, and the fact that Kubuntu doesn't even configure virtual desktops out of the box. There's little choices like that that really differentiate the two in a way that is pretty meaningful. So it's I don't know. It's weird. Why do you like a certain thing, and then don't like it another time? Or maybe I'm just too picky. I'm not sure, but I've been really enjoying the desktop sort of workflow of the way I can maximize and minimize apps and put things in different places and move things to desktops. And it's very intuitive and very smooth. And when I go back into Plasma, it's very much that old style of, everything's down in that bar. And if you can all tab to switch between stuff, and you can set it up to do things with virtual desktops, but they don't make it easy for you. And so, yeah, no real great reason, I guess, but all right.
Prepare for the hate, by the way. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to try to steamroll you with GNOME hate.
You know what? I keep an open mind about everything. I intentionally do not close the door because right now I don't like something, or there's a reason that maybe it doesn't suit my needs or the thing I'm trying to accomplish. And that goes for everything, not just desktop environments, but different applications. There are very few things that I've just said I'll never use again, because never is way too long a time. And things change, Absolutely, 3, 4, 5 releases ago, GNOME to me was pretty terrible because the performance wasn't all that good. And it was just I remember having to turn on the impatience extension to ratchet the animations down to basically nothing, because otherwise it was so choppy, it was really ugly and unusable. And they fixed it. That's just not, it's delightfully smooth now. The animation's very it's super smooth. And so when it's that smooth, even if there's that extra time of the animation happening, it's pleasant. And it's almost like a little bit of a pause in a way for your mind. What am I doing? Take a second. I don't know. I can't quite explain, like I said. And if the hate comes, if people want to give me grief, like, that's their prerogative. I don't really care. So
I enjoy it. I enjoy people who get upset for me using things that they don't like.
I can't. I don't get it. I just don't. Life's too short. It really is. There's
yeah, definitely.
If that's the worst thing in your life is that you don't like something and then you have to be vocal about it, then
I
more
think you got
power.
a pretty good life if that's the case, right?
Yeah, more power to you. You talk about first world problems, right? Anyway, Mitchell's question: customizations notwithstanding, you prefer vanilla or Ubuntu? So the Ubuntu gets me 90% of the way there, as you saw, with just a few other extensions that I install. If I was using vanilla, so if I was using vanilla GNOME, I would install dash to dock. I would install app indicators and then those same other. So it would look like Ubuntu anyway, which is why it's made sense to me in the last that I've been using it, because it's basically what I would have done with a vanilla GNOME, and it's what I do with others. So when I was testing Fedora, that's so I have to have the dock, I have to have app indicators, the system tray. I have to. I mean, I for all of the things that I absolutely love about the GNOME workflow and all of the capabilities it has, and I do like a clean desktop. You saw, I take the desktop icons away, but I need to have that Chrome, if you will, around my desktop so that I can see what's happening. I need to know if there's, I use applications that expect you have a system tray, and when you don't have one, it doesn't work right, and it's as simple as that. And I use a lot of applications that use system icons, and I mean, I don't agree with that decision. Fortunately, I can use something to overcome it, and it's not a problem. And it's the same thing with the dock. I mean, I get that you can hit a key and, but I like to see that I have, 2 Firefox windows open and my file manager's already open, and, I can just see what's happening. It's like it's a heads up display in a way of like what's going on in my system. And so those two things are the two greatest challenges I have with vanilla GNOME is the lack of a dock and the lack of system tray icons. So yeah, and that's the thing with Ubuntu is they strive to stay as close to upstream vanilla as possible. And as you saw, they only have 3 extensions installed. And so the dock, the app indicators, and the desktop icons. And so they're purposely trying not to change too much to from the upstream vision of what the GNOME desktop is, but they also recognize that these 3 things are what most people say to them. Hey, and I know most people use desktop icons. I'm a little different in that sense, but if they didn't include those and they just shipped a vanilla GNOME desktop, I think they'd have a lot of problems, because there is an expectation that for any other desktop environment, Windows, Mac, and then literally any of the other ones, that those things are there in some form or fashion. They may not look the same, they may not be in the same place, but they serve the same function. And so when you throw a user in without any of those things, even if you can train them how to do them, it is just, I mean, you can't use a computer in one way for 20, 30, 40 years or 5 years. I mean, it doesn't matter. And then all of that, understanding of what a computer is and how you use it just gets thrown away. And so even if you overcome that, it can be, it's not the most, I guess, it's not what's expected. And so it can be jarring. And so I think Ubuntu does a good job of keeping it as vanilla as possible, but adding back those pieces that I think most users, myself included, would consider to be essential to using a desktop. Well, that was a lot of talking.
Good time. Right.
It is. I enjoy it. Streaming it can be such a challenge, but it is fun. And so far I've had, oh boy, find some wood. I've had no major issues. So
yet
it'll happen. It wouldn't be fun if it didn't happen.
Man, it is cold. I'm cold.
Oh yeah, it's
I had to turn on the heater.
Let's see, what are we at here? Oh, 69 degrees in South Florida. I looked at a map earlier today. Everywhere else in the country except for South Florida is freeze is under freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
So all that complaining I do all summer long about, it's so hot and humid. I'll take 69.
Yeah, it's currently 34 here.
Yeah. Bopper, did you get snow today, or was that yesterday? My cousin David in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Hey TJ, hey Ski Meister. 2 skis, technically.
Guess nobody's gonna join us in Discord here.
Oh, the night's early. I'm only 43 minutes in. 2 inches of snow yesterday in Pittsburgh. Oh boy. Gee, I miss Pittsburgh. Actually, it is beautiful. And this time of year, actually, it's not even that bad. It's when it's like January and February and it's cold and gray. You're just so sick of wintertime. Yeah, that's when I hated living up north. For the holidays, it's fantastic. Unless, of course, you live anywhere south of a certain point where they don't have snow removal equipment, and then the slightest bit of snow is like Armageddon. I was telling Adam about I was in Atlanta, and I figured out it was in 2011, and they had ice, just like an ice storm that covered everything in like a half an inch of ice, or at least no, I don't know, something like that, and it was just like the world stopped.
Yeah,
like, nothing happened because they don't have equipment to clean the roads.
How it is here, yeah. It just like everything shuts down when we have ice storm or winter storm.
It is the end, and I hope you stock up.
Yeah, when you were in Atlanta for that one, I was actually in El Paso, Texas at the time, and we actually had snow in El Paso, if you believe it or not.
Oh yeah, Houston was. I think it was 20 degrees. It was something ridiculous. Freezing snow.
And so we had both of two of the major natural gas power plants for El Paso like froze up. And like most of the city was without power for like 4 days.
Oh man.
And like no one had power. Like we had like natural gas lines and stuff freezing up, like all kinds of stuff. And it was like, so a lot of people didn't have heat, they didn't have power. Like it was just it was bad news.
Yeah, that's no fun. And to be fair, people don't have the kind of clothing like so.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So my family lives in Washington County, which is south west of Pittsburgh, and it's a kind of a rural area. So the power lines themselves coming into the town are those big high tension power lines, but there's no grid or like, so if they go down, there's no power. And so it's been years, but there was a winter not that long ago. And we're not talking like 40 years ago or something. This was like 5-8 years ago where they lost power for like a week and in freezing cold snow. But fortunately, most people up there have, fireplaces or stove, wood burning stove, stuff like that. So you're not going to freeze to death, but just the inconvenience of not having electricity for a week. I mean, what the hell do you do? I don't have electricity. Like it goes out here for 20 minutes and I'm like, what am I going to do? It's
like, well, I'm going to burn out whatever batteries I got.
That's right. The world is coming to an end.
We turn on each other. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. He has a battery. No, so that stuff still happens. And so the next year, a couple people in my family get those natural gas powered generators that like my grandma has one that's the whole house. Like she can just like nothing's happening.
My neighbors had one and it was like mocking. Like when I lived with my folks in high school stuff, like it was mocking because like the power go out and you just hear and like their whole house is still lit up. They're still watching TV. They're having fun. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I have choice words for you guys.
Yep. Oh my. Well, I think I'm kind of out of things to talk about. I mean, there's other stuff I do. You know, Ubuntu doesn't give you OpenSSH server. So if you wanted to connect to it remotely with SSH, you'd have to install that. Oh, there's all kind of little things I do, but out of the box, it's the easiest distro for me to get up and running. There's the least amount of things to add. So I always appreciate that.
So I had something that you may or may have not have heard today.
What's that?
Um, so are you familiar with Apple's executive chief of marketing, Phil Schiller?
I am.
You know who he?
He looks great in a pair of jeans. I'll tell you that much.
So he kind of came out on an interview with CNET today and basically insinuated that kids who use Chromebooks in school perform worse than kids that use iPads. And that
Okay.
the only reason schools buy Chromebooks is because they're cheap test taking machines.
That's
So
that's a
yeah,
very interesting stance on that. I think it's technology either way, right? They're both proven to be pretty good platforms. Is
I see
iPad
them as
still
useful in two different ways, right? Like
well? One of the things you've said about Chromebooks though is that you can centrally manage them, right? I mean, it's something that's easier
very
to
easily, yeah.
yeah. And are iPads as easily managed as that?
No, they're like like they're the kind of like fleet management and stuff. Like it's nowhere near as good as what Google has.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I mean, if he could say something like that and be bombastic or sensationalistic if he's just trying to make headlines, but I think the reality is that Google has met the challenge of being in large educational institutions and have proven themselves very competent, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I would argue the same for Google Docs as well, right? I mean, that G
Oh,
Suite
definitely.
stuff is, I mean, come on.
So the takeaway that a lot of people have taken is that he's kind of insinuating that because the schools that can't afford Apple products have worse performing students than those who can.
So he's going to say like poorly funded schools, well, let's not even say poorly. Let's schools that make a decision not to spend their money on iPads and go with Chromebooks instead.
Are doing a
What?
disservice to their students.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they had he went on Twitter and to clarify his statements, but he didn't really like help it. He said every child has the ability to succeed. Helping them to do that has always been our mission. In the full conversation with CNET, we discussed giving kids and teachers the content, curriculum, and tools they need to learn, explore, and grow, not just to take a test. Again, implying that the only thing your Chromebook is doing is allowing them to take tests. And if your
I,
school system can only afford Chromebooks, you're not actually helping your kids learn, explore, and grow.
I mean, everything's web based, so I don't even understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean they're focusing on apps, right?
I
But yeah, I
guess.
mean, I'll be honest, man. I love my iPad Pro. I think the keyboard's fine for me, but I'm not typing up a paper on my iPad. Like no matter what keyboard you give me, it's just not happening. Like a Chromebook, even a cheaper Chromebook has a halfway decent keyboard.
Well, it's a physical
Like,
keyboard it's part of the device, so yeah.
well, I mean, I'm talking about like, well, my iPad Pro has a physical keyboard too, but it's not. I couldn't type a paper on that. Like, it's good for typing little messages. It's good
Right,
for
right.
even doing stuff like in a terminal or something. Just commands here and there. And but I couldn't like write some report or something like that with a
Well,
keyboard.
I have a Bluetooth case for my Galaxy Tab, and it is actually not the worst keyboard I've ever used. But yeah, it's the spacing's so tiny. The key throw is just minuscule. Like it's just not.
Yeah, and these schools, even the schools that do buy iPads, they're not buying the 13-inch iPad Pro. They're
No,
buying the $300 iPad 9.7 or whatever. Like they're not,
right.
and they might pair it with like the cheapest bulk option for a keyboard they can. It's just, and most of them, most of the time when I see iPads at APS, they're in like those bulky cases, and they're not even meant for like typing out things. They're just meant for like small kids to do simple math problems on or something like that. They're not even. We have them for reading tablets. We have iPads for reading tablets for several grades.
I might buy the
But
argument that a tablet would be better for like preschool and then elementary, like that.
yeah, exactly. But once you get into like some serious number crunching and algebra, and you start getting into like having to type papers out, having to do more complex things in your work, it just falls short, right? At least that's from what I gather.
Well, so then if we break down the argument, then really what they're saying is based on no substantial evidence that they can point to, or maybe they did, that provisioning and management of the systems doesn't matter. Price isn't really price shouldn't be a concern, right? We're talking about schools, most school systems cutting, any kind of extracurricular or music
Yeah.
education, like classical arts, all of that stuff's out the window. Forget that.
Yeah.
But
And I completely recognize that the school system I work for has a good like a great deal more money than any of these rural schools systems do. Like
right.
there, if you live in like a city in like a big metro area, yeah, you're probably gonna have a lot more money to buy things like iPads and whatnot. But you go to any, I don't know, second or third tier city or any rural area, and they might have one computer lab, right? They're not even gonna have Chromebooks for every kid.
Yeah. it seems disingenuous at best. Obviously self-serving, which I mean, if he's the marketing guy, that
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
But that it seems like just a little bit of a stretch to say the least. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
he has put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah. Well, WWJD. What would Jobs do?
That's true. A stylus? Who needs one of those?
That's right.
That's what Jobs would do.
Headphone
I
port.
love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Although you did tell me something that they are bringing back the escape key on
Yeah,
MacBooks.
the new 16-inch MacBook Pros. And get this. They made them thicker to fit a bigger battery and better thermal.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say that a
They made them
16
they
inch
made them
Mac.
slightly thicker and slightly heavier just to get the stuff in there.
Yeah. And that's okay because that's the way it should be. But I think a 16-inch MacBook Pro sounds like a glorious machine. I mean, I'm probably just going to go look at one just to see what I mean, I'm not going to buy one, but I'm going to look at one.
Yeah. Yeah, actually the new 16 inches are at the same price as the previous ones with like
Okay.
more storage and other stuff. Like I was actually kind of surprised that they priced them exactly the same.
Yeah. And the other thing that I will say is that hardware holds its value. I mean,
That it does.
I've had some Mac Minis over the years, and I've used them. Like I'll buy one, use it for a couple years, and sell it for a good amount of a good percentage of the amount that I paid for it. I was surprised. The last one, I had done a couple upgrades. I upgraded the memory and the hard drive, and it was all up to date with the latest OS and all that. And I got way more than I thought I would for it. It was an eBay auction, and the bids kept coming in. I'm like, really? Do you guys? If you read the description, right? I mean, it's like things like 6 years old. Didn't matter. And I think at that point too, it was one of the last generations that was of that style, that chassis that where you could upgrade stuff, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think people liked those in particular. So anyway, there you go. How's that for not being closed minded? We talk about Apple stuff, and I really
Cool
can't.
stuff.
Yeah, it's all out there, man. We're all using it, right? That's just how
Yeah,
it
it's
goes.
I mean, it's news, right?
Well, I mean, but it is something that comes up, like you said. If I get any flack for using GNOME, like whatever, but the
Yeah.
for a little shameless plug, I mean, it is my stream, but DLN Extend this last week we talked about proprietary software and being, um, just looking at proprietary software in the right light, and understanding that there are a lot of industries that are only really served well by proprietary software. And Nate talks about using CAD and how he's found a proprietary tool that just does everything he needs it to do, and it solves a lot of the problems he's had with FreeCAD. And then I think of, Noah made the claim 2 weeks ago on Ask Noah about Inkscape being a real replacement for like Adobe Illustrator, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not. I'm sorry. My wife's a graphic designer, and if I sat her down in front of Inkscape, I mean, she would understand what the tools were, but I guarantee you within 90 seconds, she would find something like, well, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or that doesn't make
Yeah.
sense, or, and that's not to take away from Inkscape, because it is a very capable program, but it's not the industry standard. And it's also not on the cutting edge of things that happen in the industry. And even my wife, she doesn't use Adobe products, and she gets she has a lot of problems because of it. She prefers CorelDRAW, which she's used forever, and it does everything she needs it to do, but everyone else uses Illustrator. And so either she's
Yeah.
getting files in Illustrator, or she has to send it back to them in Illustrator, and that translation doesn't always work. And so if you're in that industry, you're using Adobe products. It's as simple as that. Or if you aren't, you're going to have to figure out ways around it. And I'm sure there are people that use Inkscape and they use it successfully, and that's fantastic. And I know there is a segment of that designer population that works really well. Krita is another, good example for drawing on a tablet and stuff like that. But the reality is that the CAD one is a good example for, industrial design, and other things as well. I mean, there are certain things you have to use to do your job, and, so anyway, yeah, DLN Extend.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so
Plugging.
we talked about that. We had another really great discussion about, the too much choice, which, I mean, it's funny because we keep dancing around basically the same set of topics, but the idea that there's too much choice in Linux, and it dilutes the developer pool, and, rehashing ideas over and over and solving the same problems. And, but the beauty of the choice, and how that actually, allows us to innovate and do things and make changes quickly. And, anyway, yeah, there you go. My shameless plug for go listen to DLN and Extend. Sorry, guy.
So I have tried Krita, or Krita, or however people pronounce it. I have tried it on both the GNU/Linux and on Windows, and it tends to behave way better on Windows with tablets and stuff, drawing tablets. And I think that has more to do with the maturity of the driver.
I was going to say, yeah,
stuff.
like the Wacom drivers for Windows.
For Windows, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because they just passed a milestone, and it wasn't a huge milestone, but it was something like 10,000 downloads of Kate on the Windows
In the
Store,
Windows Store, yeah.
which I know that doesn't, it's not a lot. It isn't, but it's something. And, you know, the fact
Yeah.
that KD produces Windows ports of their apps, some of them, um, I think that's
It's
pretty cool.
great.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you could, if you have the build system, the overhead for it, you probably learn a lot of lessons on how to improve, you know, the product. So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are probably challenges that they find in building a Windows version that kind of expose general bugs and general, performance things that they could improve overall, not just for a Windows version. But maybe they
well,
wouldn't uncover those in just building the Linux version.
and it opens the conversation too, right?
Oh yeah,
Here's an open source tool that I can use on Windows. Um, Open source, what's that? You know, and I mean, I think it extends capabilities to users that otherwise, I mean, think about it. If you had to use Windows and you had the availability of some or all of those Qt apps, KDE apps on Windows, wouldn't that be a
yeah.
good
Look at
thing?
you, spectacle.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a good thing, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, I would dig spectacle on Windows.
yeah, and I mean,
And
a lot of the software we use is multi-platform. You know, the browsers we
correct,
use.
correct.
You know, I'm OBS, the you know Telegram, like all of the social stuff. But for the native apps,
And a
that
lot of stuff's in web, right? You
yeah,
know,
I was just thinking, yeah, web based solves a lot of that. But think of if they could figure out a way to get like you know snaps and flat packs and stuff to work on
oh yeah.
Windows. Where you could, because do you think about it, they're containerized, right? I mean, if you could
Mhm.
have, you know, a container-based system that could run on some layer in Windows, I mean, that'd be cool. You'd have a lot of software.
So speaking of Linux and Windows, um, I have been quite enjoying WSL2, and I've been using WSL2 for roughly a month now at work, and it has performed admirably. Um, I had some kind of memory leak today, and that was the first time in a month that I've had any problems with it at all. And talking about it would be nice to get the open source stuff onto Windows, like that covers all of my terminal uses. All of the stuff I need in a terminal is there.
So
And
you're not running a desktop environment though. You're running the
no, it's
Linux.
it's just I'm running it in the Windows terminal. Is the that like fancy one they made a video for and everything.
I saw something today that someone said they were disappointed because it doesn't look as good as it did in that promo.
I don't know. I think it looks fine. Well, you have to enable the acrylic thing in the JSON like file for the settings,
Oh,
and
maybe
it
that's it.
it, it looks pretty neat. But at the same time, like it's distracting. And if I have like a browser open with a white page, it's like, well, can't see anything. So I just turn it off because it just gets
Yeah,
in the way.
yeah.
Um, but it's a great tool. There's no graphical apps at least that I'm running. I mean, you can install an X server and like get graphical apps working, but I don't bother with that because, like you had said earlier, most of the open source apps that we use on Linux have Windows version,
Mm-hmm.
and so like just run the Windows version, right? And I have access to all the like Ansible and Terraform and all the DevOps tools I use. I have all the stuff I need. I can access things like Go and other build tools. I'm really waiting for Canonical to figure out how they can get snaps working in there. Because if they can get snaps working in there, that would be glorious.
Is that a limitation of like System D? I think I saw or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. There's no system D in the WSL container.
Gotcha.
But there's so much good stuff to be had there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can accomplish with it.
Well, and this is the first real, like, let's just say the first real implementation of,
Like the first
Linux.
viable one, yeah.
Right, right. So this is the one that I think is going to get widely adopted. And when people start building process, like key business process on that system, Microsoft is going to definitely step in. And I mean, they're going to step up and improve it in all of the ways that it's deficient now or lacking in some way.
Oh,
Um,
definitely. And a lot of, I know you'll hear folks say like, Microsoft is, embrace, extend, extinguish, or some, like as if this is some ploy against like Linux desktop, and it's not. It's a ploy against the Mac, because they realize so many people were switching over to the Mac for development, and that this is their way of getting those people back onto Windows, because the missteps that Apple has made with hardware and their software, like this version of all their software is pretty questionable quality. Really, it's kind of a bummer. And so they're starting to look at that, and Apple wasn't really focused on their pros and their developers and stuff. So this was Microsoft's way of saying, hey, come to Windows, you'll have a huge choice of hardware to choose. Plus, you can still have your Unix tools and stuff on the side, right?
well,
Like
not only
it had
that,
nothing to do with just like, don't go buy that System 76. Like they're not even thinking, they're not even that's not even on their radar.
and I think a lot of it too comes down to how you use those systems. So, I mean, I know as a sysadmin, former sysadmin, like that would have been a dream for me to be able to run Linux in a Windows environment, because then I could do all of the Windows, domain kind of stuff that I would need to do, and then have access to all those powerful Linux tools for everything else. And I mean, I that would be amazing. Like all of the networking stuff I did, if I could do it with that Linux instead of, I mean, just having a good terminal system and SSH and like just all of the tools that we use all the time to admin systems. Like you're saying Ansible and Terraform and all that, like it solves so many problems and makes life so much easier. And the fact that before it was a hack and a workaround, I mean, I had terminal emulators and different things that would kind of work, and
Yeah.
until they didn't, right? But you could never do any kind of like Linux subsystem kind of stuff, like, and the fact that it's all about the audience, right? And if you look at, and this goes, like, you're right, the developer culture, the developer, niche of who is using these systems. I mean, Dell's Sputnik program, right? I mean, it's for developers, it's for AI, it's for science and research, and I mean, they're going after the people that are using computers in a very serious, dedicated kind of way. So when desktop users look at Microsoft loves Linux, they see it as being disingenuous. Um, and it's a marketing thing. Of course, there's always a certain amount of like BS in marketing. It's just kind of the way that works. But the
Hmm.
reality is that I think maybe not Microsoft loves Linux, but Microsoft loves supporting the enterprise, and that is their bread and butter. And this furthers that mission to support the enterprise, because the people that are in the enterprise see this and think this is fantastic. Whereas people in, just in general desktop land, Windows and Mac and Linux desktop, they kind of see it as being like, well, Microsoft's always been, the enemy of open source. And so how can I trust this? And Microsoft's never been the enemy of the enterprise. you
Correct.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, some of they're definitely some of the pricing stuff. I mean, some of the aggressive nature of their contracts and kind of like, and they have done the embrace, extend, extinguish stuff over and over. So they've come by that honestly. I'm not saying none of that exists, but I just think that they're being very pragmatic about their approach to Linux right now and open source in general, where of course it suits them. They've got Azure. It was 60% last time I checked. It wouldn't surprise me if it was more now.
Yeah.
Linux, penetration in their Azure product. And if it was such a bad idea, why did every desktop Linux or Linux vendor, actual Linux vendor, Red Hats and Ubuntu's and or Canonicals and all, as soon as they said Windows subsystem, they were like, yes, yes. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, we'll put our stuff on there. Yeah.
Right. How can we make that work? It's like the people with Pine, right? I mean, Pine reaching out to developers for distributions for the Pine book and for the Pine phone, and all of them are like, yeah, we want to do that. Because that's the situation that makes sense, right? So, hey, Explorer, how you doing? Tempcore. Oh my,
These guys in chatter.
they're quiet tonight.
They're quiet tonight, yeah.
They're quiet. Yeah, that's okay.
Come on, guys, make fun of us.
We're just
Something.
we're hitting them with the knowledge, man. It's so much, you know. Oh, there's the sound effects. That was my cat, by the way. I have a lion. Oh my. Well, I don't know, folks. I think I'm going to call this a successful hour and 15-minute stream. I've had no technical issues that I'm aware of tonight, which is great because, like I said, the whole point of this was because I wanted to go through the Ubuntu stuff, and I made a video that didn't work, and that bummed me out. So this is sort of the bounce back from that. I'm happy about this. So.
Actually, Vince, Eric gets a thumbs up.
Well, if I don't get at least one thumbs down, I'm going to be disappointed because that means I didn't do something right. So, Adam, I'm counting on you.
I can't do it, man. I care too much.
Yeah, right. I know it was you. It was you. Oh my.
Good times.
Good times. Good times had by all, actually. All right. Well, for all of you folks in the rest of the country that will be freezing tonight, keep warm. Enjoy the smell of those furnaces kicking on for the first time of the year. What a terrible smell.
Think your house is on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, thanks for coming. I appreciate seeing you all here. Great group of folks as always. And yeah, Adam, thanks for being on voice chat so I don't have to talk to myself.
Yeah, no problem.
That. And everyone have a fantastic evening. See you soon.